This is B&B Radio, the official podcast for Bolus and Barbells. What we're planning to do with this is we're planning to showcase Type 1 athletes from any and all sports. I myself am a strength athlete, and Bolus and Barbells has typically focused on strength athletics, gym goers, crossfitters, powerlifters, strongman, weightlifters of any sort. But this is going to be more broad-reaching. Today on the show, I have Patrick Devlin, who is a multiple Ironman finisher, a ultra runner, and just a great guy. He is celebrating, or has just celebrated, his 7th anniversary. So he's got a little bit of skin in the game. And as you'll see from the format, we're just going to go through some basic things. We're going to talk about his sport, how he prepares for it, and maybe you'll learn something from that. That's the entire goal with this, is to present information that is relevant to any type 1 diabetic pursuing sports of any kind, and to have success with that and to live better with type 1. So without further ado, let's get straight into the podcast. This podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any illness or disease that you may have. We recommend that before trying anything discussed within this podcast, that you consult with your primary physician. All right, so I'm here with Mr. Devlin, and so we'll get the basics out of the way first off. So we're looking at, how old are you? What was your date of diagnosis?
I'm 31 years old, and my date of diagnosis was actually 2 days ago in 2010. So I'm right at 7 years.
Well, happy diversary.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Still kicking, I see, and so doing quite well. So kind of what was the story? Like how, everybody's kind of got their own, it happened out of the blue, or I've been sick for 6 months. So kind of what's your diagnosis story?
So mine was kind of strange. Well, everybody's going to say that their diagnosis story is kind of strange because it's the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. But I work in oil and gas, and my company at the time asked me to go live in Malaysia for 6 months. So I said, sure, why not? Well, I came back in about, I guess it was August or September of 2009. And I lost weight when I was in Malaysia. I didn't really particularly like the food or whatever. And when I came back, I was around 160 pounds soaking wet, and I had dropped 10 pounds. Didn't think much of it, thought it would come back quick. Well, it continued to go down until the point where I woke up one morning and I'm like, look, I've added another belt loop in. This is really strange. I'm going to weigh myself. And I was down to like 125. And so my wife looked at me and she was like, something's wrong. You probably have like a parasite from street food or something like that. And so I went to my GP, she drew blood, everything looked okay physically. Like I was acting fine, I suppose. She called me the next morning and said, your blood sugar's 900. You need to go to the emergency room. And, and I said, well, no, I'm sorry. I'm getting dressed. I'm going to work. And she's like, well, if I can squeeze you into an appointment with an endocrinologist, will you go? And I said, well, yeah, sure, I guess. So I walk in the door there, and the guy looks at me, looks at my blood test from my GP, and says, congratulations, you're type 1. Here's your insulin, and see you later. So it was a big shock, but I look back on it, and I look back at all the symptoms that I was presenting, the urination every 90 minutes overnight, I could probably eat a horse for breakfast and then a cow for lunch and still feel like I was just dying of starvation. But within a week, that stuff was gone. Being on insulin and everything, the hunger was gone. After 2 weeks, I probably gained 10 pounds and life was good again.
Did they mention anything about you being in diabetic ketoacidosis, or?
It never came up, and that's something that I've heard of people, going into, and I imagine that at the time I had to have been. I mean, with a blood sugar of 800, I had to have been, and it was never, like I read the diabetic ketoacidosis symptoms, the nausea, the vomiting, stomach pains. I didn't have that, but I had everything else. So
that's something in through getting out of the community and talking with a lot of type 1s is there seems to be two main stories that go this way. Is that they were in full-on DKA and like violently ill and couldn't figure out why, flu-like symptoms. And so they went in and like immediately started them. Or there's your story where it's like this was kind of a gradual thing, and that even though you did present with this really high blood sugar, I mean 800-900, that's crazy.
yeah.
But you weren't exhibiting those really severe DKA signs.
Right.
And so it just kind of goes to show that sometimes the gradual lead in to diagnosis is, you were probably killing off, the islet cells and you still had some residual production probably, and that's what was keeping you from those really severe. So that's just kind of neat to me that it seems to be that there's those two main diagnosis stories.
Right.
There's lots of different ways that you get to that point, but it seems like there's either the really severe onset or the more gradual onset without the severe DKA symptoms. Man, and at 7 years, I'm sitting here and the audience is not going to be able to see it, but I'm doing the video chat with you, and I can see trophies and all this stuff behind you. So let's kind of get into the meat of it, the meat and potatoes of why I'm talking to you today. I mean, other than you're a great guy, and we actually have in common that we both work in the oil and gas industry. So I think that's pretty rad.
Yeah.
But so you're a triathlete.
Yes, sir.
And I also know that you've done some more of the extreme distance running. So kind of what got you started in that?
So it's funny. I was a track athlete, a basketball player in high school, went to college and did nothing except gain weight and get a girlfriend and that kind of stuff, the typical college things. And got out of college, started working oil and gas. You work 70, 80 hours a week to try and, catch up with everybody else. And it wasn't until when I was diagnosed that I was like, look, I need to do something. I don't know what it's going to be. For whatever reason, I feel like I remember watching one of the Ironman broadcasts, the World Championship broadcasts that they do in Hawaii. They put it on NBC, and there was a lady who had some sort of terrible disease where, like, her feet felt like they were on fire 100% of the time. And she's off here doing this 17-hour ultra endurance type race, and I was like, I have no excuse. There's no reason why I can't at least try something like that. So I signed up for a sprint, did it, had a blast, learned a lot, and then have progressed until I got to the point where I was like, I have to try the full distance. I have to try an Ironman. And in 2014, I did Ironman Texas, and at the time, it was the best day of my life. It couldn't have gone more perfect. Blood sugars were terrific. The race itself was the greatest day of my life. And then since then, it was like 10 weeks later, I did another one. The next year, I did another one. And once I kind of experienced the Ironman stuff, I wanted to try my hand at the trail running, the ultra marathons. I've done a 50K, I've got a 100-mile on the calendar for next year. And, it just, it snowballs, where, you look at it and you say, no, that distance, is scary when you look at the mileage, but at the same time, you break it into little chunks and you go attack it.
And that's the funny thing is me and you are at the about as far opposite ends of the spectrum as you can get as far as our sports of choice. But it's the same, you talk about once you achieve a distance, well, then it's like, well, I can do more. I know I can do more. And so what's the next goal? And so, you started in and did a sprint, then you did a full Ironman, and now you've done a 50K, and now you've got a 100-miler, which is just, like, my little brain can't fathom what running 100 miles would be like. But it's the same way in strength sports. It's, I used to think a 225-pound bench was just, man, I would be set for life if I could bench that. And then it became 315, and then it became, a body weight squat, a double body weight squat, and same thing on deadlift and the other events. And so I think for us that are competitive athletes, there's always, we're never satisfied once we achieve one goal. It's immediately, I can walk off from a personal best with a weight, and I'm immediately thinking about what's the next weight that I need to strive for.
And where is the lessons learned? Like, what could I have improved on the technique that maybe helped? I got the personal best, but what could I have tweaked a little bit that maybe would have got me 5 more pounds or 10 more seconds or whatever it is that you're trying to get after?
Yeah, and I think that is a very beneficial mindset when we then take that and apply it to the diabetes. I know for you that the duration of time is much greater than what I have to deal with. I may do an event, but it's really only about 60 to 90 seconds, and then I'm done with that event. I'm back at rest. But you're going for hours. I mean, so on a 100-miler, what is the time period that would take to do 100
So
miles?
most of them will have a 30-hour cutoff. And they'll have intermediate cutoffs throughout the day too. You'll have a cutoff at 50 mile, you'll have a cutoff at 65, you'll have a cutoff at whatever. But realistically, if I'm going to go attack a 100-mile race, I'm going to pick a course that is going to suit me the best, and I'm going to try and not just be aiming to meet the 30-hour cutoff, but be trying to push 25 hours or pick a number, pick a goal and then go after it. But the time frame for an Ironman, is you have to be under 17 hours, and all of mine have been within 14 to 15 and a half hours. So it's a long day. Plus you're up. That's just the race time. You're awake for 3 hours before the race, and then you're awake for 4 or 5 hours after the race. So you've put your body through something that's hard, no matter what. If you're perfect, you have a functional pancreas, or whether you don't have a functional pancreas.
Yeah, and that's something else. We'll get to what your peers think about it, but the fact that we're always running a calculation in the background of how much insulin do I have on board, how much when was the last time I ate, when do I need to eat again to keep a balance. So how, in running these long distances in these very broad ranges of time, how do you find, just for you, is the best way to fuel and manage insulin dosages through that? And now, real quick, are you multiple daily injections, or are you
I'm on an Omnipod, and I run the Dexcom CGM. I don't run the Dexcom CGM 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I typically will save it for heavy training weeks where I want the extra data. But sometimes it's more of a hassle than I prefer. But I run it for race days. I run it for heavy training weeks. But the fueling aspect is crazy. I have fallen in love with a product called UCAN, and it has done wonders as far as keeping a level blood sugar, or helping to assist with a level blood sugar, while also giving me the energy, the carbs, and even the protein that I would need to maintain my effort level. But then I'll also supplement with energy gels and with a product called EFS, Endurance Drink. It's like a Gatorade, basically, Enduralite. But it's always a balance, because there's going to be carbs in the UCAN, there's going to be carbs in the gels, there's going to be carbs in everything you take, and I can look at the Dexcom and say, all right, I'm at 120, but I just took in 80 grams of carbs because it was my schedule. So do I need to take a little bit, or is my effort level high enough? Is the atmospheric conditions, is it hot enough to where I'm going to burn through that quickly, and that kind of thing? It is literally Rain Man math the whole day.
That's the perfect way of saying that, because, like you said, not only is it your pacing, it's the weather, it's the stress level that you're under. If you've gotten behind time, I'm sure that trying to play catch up then makes it more stressful on both activity level and mental aspect of it. So, I have to ask, in like an Ironman, what, just a guesstimate, what do you think your carb intake is for the whole duration of the
I don't know that I know the carb intake, but I've looked at my caloric intake for each of the 3 that I've done, and it's averaged anywhere between 7 to 9,000 calories for an event like that. And you will typically burn off, like my burn rate, at least according to the Garmin that I will wear, will say that I burned anywhere from 3.5 to 5. So you want to stay plus, you want to stay on the positive side. But you take 3 days worth of food in a 15-hour window, and you still feel like you're starving.
Oh, that is insane. I mean, and I'm sure, and the one thing about aerobic exercise is that to a point, it really revs the metabolism very high because of the duration of training. So, you're having to eat for activity, but then you also have to eat with what just your body would need to have to function on a normal day-to-day basis. So, you're double fueling there basically for, your base calories, which I'm sure is around the 3,000 to 4,000 mark for you, and all that activity. I mean, the hours.
It's great. And there's nothing that's like, so in the middle of an Ironman, at the 60-mile mark, they give you a special needs bag. You can pack it with whatever you want, and I'll pack it with, a sticky bun or something that's, really terrible for you, but at the same time, it's giving me 500 calories that I'm going to burn through in an hour, and it's like it'll never existed.
Yep. So that's funny you say that. So we have 5 events in Strongman, and after every event, if the Dexcom has survived the event, I haven't ripped it off with the log or the tire or something, I'm looking at it, and I will have a pinch of salt and a Uncrustable PB&G sandwich. And I tell people that, and they absolutely go, "You're crazy. That's a horrible food source. Like, why are you doing this to yourself?" And I might only have 20 minutes to eat and get ready for the next event. And so I have to have something that's small and very dense in calories and carbs to fuel me for that next event. I also do, if I can't get the food in, because it gets hot sometimes. I compete here in Texas too. And so, it can be 100 degrees in an asphalt parking lot where we're doing some of these contests. And so if I can't get the sandwich in, I eat 6 to 8 glucose tabs between every event just to fuel me for the next event, and then do it again and again and again. So I definitely I don't even know what trying to get that much food in would be like, but I definitely understand the key importance that fueling for the activity places on us. And you're right, it's a balancing act. Like, it's Rain Man math. You constantly have to be running the figures and forecasting. I'm sure it's not a reactionary thing. You cannot be reactionary in a competitive environment. You have to forecast this out. I'm sure you're training leading into it. You're looking at, like you said, you wear the Dexcom on your heavier training days, and I'm sure that data then allows you to extrapolate, what am I going to have to do come contest day?
Yeah, no, my last major event, my last Ironman in Boulder, Colorado was an interesting one. I got out of the water. I had a slower swim. The altitude got me in the water more than it did in the bike and the run. But I got out of the water with numb lips or tingly lips, and as soon as the Dexcom clicked in, as soon as it started to register, it showed me at like 65 with double arrows down. And it threw off my entire nutrition plan because I had to take in, and you only carry, you carry what your plan says, and you have a few spares, but I didn't have enough spares to get me through transition and start to make progress on. It's not like you sit down and you wait for the blood sugar to come back up. No, you get on the bike, you start making progress, and you're shoving food in your mouth. But what that ended up doing is that put me off my nutrition plan, because at the 90-mile mark, I I ran out to a point. So I had to supplement with what was on the course, which didn't agree with my stomach. And so it's a compounding effect. It's a snowball in the worst way.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. And yeah, because you're basically, I've seen the spy belts, or they're basically like little mini fanny packs that y'all wear. And I don't. For those people that will listen to this that haven't, are not too aware of triathlons in general, when you come out of the water, you are running, changing shoes, getting out of the wetsuit, clipping into your bike and going. And what are your transition? What's your goal for transition?
For a full Ironman, it's in and out in 5 minutes, and that's stripping a wetsuit. If you're gonna put on a different jersey or whatever, you do all of that. You take your nutrition, you put your bike shoes on, and then you're out the door. And 5 minutes sounds like a long time, but that also includes the run out of the water to the tent, and then the run from the tent to the bike, which maybe if you're lucky it's 100 yards, but if you're not lucky it's 800 yards. And so at the same time you've got no blood in your legs, and so you're struggling. It's like being drunk. It really is like being intoxicated when you get out of the water. Nothing wants to work right, but you've got to push. You just got to go.
Yeah, you can't call timeout and be like, "Hey, let's stop the clock and let my toes get feeling back in them, and let's go." Yeah, and that's the thing, People are familiar with Ironmans and triathlons for sure, but I don't think that they really understand the high level of pain tolerance and mental toughness that it takes to do well or even complete one of these events. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm real excited to have you on, is, so people can understand that this is a very difficult thing. I lift weights, but the duration is very short and the intensity is very high. But you're doing something over a broad span of time that, while the intensity varies a bit more, just the push, the ability to push yourself through hours of demanding time in the bike, in the water, on the road running is pretty phenomenal to me. I have an immense amount of respect for you guys. There's no way I could do it. One, I can't swim. So right off the bat, I'm kind of done. I don't think anybody's going to let me out there with a wakeboard, paddling my feet too bad.
Yeah.
So how do you
give yourself a little bit of credit, though? After I finished my first Ironman, my wife was doing the CrossFit type boot camp type workouts, and so she was like, "You got to come with me for one of them. You just got to see you got to experience that," because I had lifted weights since I was in high school, and so I go in and I'm all kitted out in my Ironman stuff. I feel like I could conquer whatever you put in front of me, and I threw up 3 times, and this is in a room full of 50-year-old ladies that are kicking my butt, and I had to excuse myself 3 separate times, and eventually I just stopped, and I'm like, look, this is. You guys can do this thing, and I'm going to go off and do this other thing, and it's going to be
okay. That's what's really funny, is the aerobic capacity versus the anaerobic capacity. There's some carryover between the two for sure, but if you take a pure aerobic athlete and you throw him into a pure anaerobic environment, it's not going to be a good day. And if you took me and you wanted me to cycle 50 miles in a day, my quads would be dead. I mean, the first mile, my quads would probably be on fire because I have no endurance fibers. That's not. I'm made to be really fast and explosive for a very short period of time. So, there's probably, how many people are there usually at one of these Ironman
So a normal one will be in the range of 1,500 to 2,500, and they'll range from age 18 to 75. I know when I did one of the races, there was a 75-year-old woman who had done some ungodly number of consecutive Ironmans, and so she she finished with a time that was pretty close to mine. But I mean, it's a wide range of body types and all of that. Very, very diverse.
Yeah, anybody can attempt one. There's no bar for entry.
Just a lot of money. the Ironman brand has a monopoly. They make their money. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I understand completely. I have to pay a federation fee, and every contest has a fee. Not including the travel and the equipment to be able to compete.
Yeah.
You've got the bikes and the swimsuit and the shoes.
But at the same time, at an event like yours, you're going to see a guy out there in what appears to you as very, very cheap gear, very like entry level, whatever, and he may throw up some crazy numbers. And you'll see the same thing in an Ironman. You'll see a guy on what looks like maybe a bike from Walmart, and I'm sitting on a bike that is I'm making car payments on, and he'll be throwing down more power than I could ever imagine to put down. So
you're absolutely correct. One of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my life was this guy showed up in blue jean shorts and work boots and pressed a 290-pound log overhead, weighing 220 pounds. Yeah, exactly. So you're very, very correct. You can't. No amount of money or equipment is going to offset genetics and an exemplary amount of hard work. Those two things are what really sets it apart. The other stuff is like the 1%. So how do these are big contests, and I'm sure there's maybe another one or two Type 1s. I know there's a pretty big Ironman community in Texas of Type 1s, but the people that are not diabetics, when they find out that this is what you're doing, that you're running there with them, and that maybe you're beating their times or that you're finishing really well, how do they react to that?
It's not something that when I finish those races or while you're on course, you may run across, and I've certainly run across. I'll pull up alongside somebody and I see a tube dangling out of their shorts or whatever, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I had that pump for 3 years or whatever, and we'll sit there and chat. But then for the most part, I think if somebody's going to run up behind me and see the Omnipod on my calf, they'll look at me and go, what is that? More in that they're like, is that some sort of performance enhancing, whatever? And I'll say no, but I wish it had built-in Wi-Fi or something, sarcastic and kind of just go away from me. I don't need you to be asking questions or whatever. But my close group, those are the people that I don't know and I've never met and I never will meet or whatever. But the people that are around me, when they find out that that's my chosen sport, that's what I prefer to do, and I also have this thing that goes on that I deal with every day. I would say that there's an element of respect, but it's more of, I don't think they look at it as, oh wow, he's diabetic and he does these Ironmans. It's more of, what he loves to do is Ironmans, but he's also diabetic. I feel like the diabetes for me, I try and present it as a secondary thing, not what shapes me.
Okay, now you're giving me goosebumps. So back 2015, I did a contest in Phoenix, and a podcast called the Diabetes Power Show. Yes. Caught me, and when they were asking me questions and everything, they asked me, how do I present, how do I tell people, that I'm Type 1 and all that, and I said almost the exact same thing you just said. I'm a strongman first and a diabetic second, and I really think that that's a very, very important concept for people to understand, is that you are not defined by the disease. you can do whatever you want to do. You can pursue any sport that you want to pursue, and it's not a hindrance. Does it make it more difficult? Absolutely. I'm not saying that at all. But you can't let the diabetes be the defining factor in your life. You're Patrick Devlin, the Ironman finisher, ultra distance runner, who is also a type 1 diabetic. You're not the type 1 diabetic
Right.
who runs Ironmans. That seems like a very minor changing of the wording, but I think carries over to a very important mindset overall in how you accept the disease and live with it.
Sure. There's plenty of days where you can say that the diabetes wins. I don't get my workout in because I've had high blood sugar all day and I just have no energy. Or I get 30 minutes into a workout and my blood sugar drops to the point where I can't continue. So there are plenty of days where the diabetes wins, and I do feel like it is, more prevalent. But that's a 1% versus a 99%. A 99% is I go in and I get my work done, and the diabetes is in the background, or it's swiping over on the phone to see the number and on the Dexcom, or it's sticking to my nutrition plan, and I don't have any issues. But yeah, no, it's I don't want to look at the diabetes to say, well, I wouldn't be doing Ironmans if I didn't get diagnosed, because they are tied. I don't know if I would have gotten into Ironmans had I not come across this life-changing experience, which was, finding out that I'm diabetic. But at the same time, it's not what drove me. It's not what drives me every day to say, I have to finish this Ironman because I'm diabetic and I want people to know. I feel like it's more of just, hey, I did it. And, if it can take somebody else who maybe is struggling, newly diagnosed, or just is going through their type 1 life and saying, I shouldn't do those things because it's going to be too hard. Well, yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but it's not something that you can't. You can go get after whatever you want to get after, and you be an aerial artist like the woman you were mentioning earlier, or you can be an Ironman or a strongman or whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm completely agree, and that's really the big message that I'm trying to convey to people with this podcast. And yeah, that's hit the nail on the head, my friend. So what's something most people don't know about you?
I would say, let me think. Well, I'm a brand new father. We have a 4-month-old, almost 5-month-old baby. So I would say a lot of people know that, but it may be a little still unknown. And boy.
So what do you do outside of training and working and being a new father? That's probably right. 5 minutes in your day.
Awake
at this
every
point.
3 hours to feed the baby, and yeah, we have one of the ones that chooses not to sleep, and I just bumped into a friend of mine who was like, yeah, my 4-month-old sleeps 8 hours at a time, and I'm like, I really want to punch you in the face. But no, I would say. I would say not a lot of people know about me that my father has multiple myeloma, a blood cancer, and 3 years ago when he was diagnosed, we had no plans to have a kid. We had no, thoughts of any of that, and it was crazy to me. Typically, the length of time that you can fight that disease is about 3 years. Well, he crossed that this past summer and went and met with his doctors, and he's doing okay. But he got to show them the baby pictures, and the doctor's like, he looks at the doctor and he says, this wasn't in the cards 3 years ago. This is what you gave me, and that when he told me that story, it blew me away. And there's I would say a few people that know that he's fighting that, but it's something that is relatively private, and it won't be now. But
well, I greatly appreciate you sharing that with me, and that's a very powerful sentiment to have happen because of that. That's the thing about it. Most people never go through their lives having to deal with that, having you know chronicle or terminal disease hit their lives, but you've been experiencing it, and then for that to happen, and you get to kind of have that moment with your dad where he could hold the baby,
Yeah.
and that's a powerful moment. I'm a father myself, so I know I was the one. I'm one of three kids, so I was the one that they never expected to have kids. So when I did,
Oh, my.
it was like, oh, Rodney had a kid, so now all that stuff that he did is fixing to come back to him tenfold. But yeah, and that's awesome. Being a dad is probably one of my is the greatest achievement I've ever managed to do. To have a healthy, well-adjusted. So far, she's only 8, so we'll see how that turns out. Child is a phenomenal thing, and what's really funny, and you're kind of in the beginning stages of that, but as my daughter has grown up watching me live with type 1, she has a unique perspective, and I think that this happens a lot with parents that have type 1. Their kids kind of always see that and see us coping and living and not succumbing to the daily struggles of it, and it makes them much more able to handle strife.
That's crazy that you say something like that, because I signed up for this Ironman in this coming April. Probably I was dumb to do that, but because I didn't have any expectation of what it was going to take to keep this baby alive for those 8 months that I would be trying to train at the same time. But when I think about when I'm driving in the morning, driving to work or whatever, and I think about crossing the finish line or running past him while I'm on the run course and seeing him there, I'm like, I get choked up to a point where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to handle that emotionally. I'm going to, I feel like I could probably just sit down on the ground and just want to hold him while I'm in the middle of the run. But know that, when he grows up, he's going to, like you said, he's going to see the things that I go through on a daily basis. And maybe that will keep him from, getting frustrated or not wanting to go try something because it looks like it's too hard or something like that. I hope it it changes the way he perceives challenges.
Yeah, I 100% believe that it will. And, if you're like me, I would probably break down and bawl right there at the finish line holding my kid. To kind of share a little story with you, with my first powerlifting meet, my daughter would have been 3 years old. And so, in a powerlifting meet, you have 3 attempts at squat, 3 attempts at bench, 3 attempts at deadlift. And I was going for my first 500-pound deadlift. And it was a huge milestone for me. It's kind of like the real big number on the deadlift that you hit that now you've kind of made it. Like you're
right.
An intermediate lifter typically by that point. And right before I went, the room got deathly quiet. And my daughter just yells at the top of her little lungs,
man.
"Go,
yeah.
Daddy!" And I would have shot my spine across the room in 1,000 pieces to pull that deadlift because she was expecting me to pull it. And so that's a very magical moment. I have a feeling that moment's going to happen to you in the future. When you're crossing the finish line, your kid's going to be there cheering for you. And I can tell you from personal experience, that is a very powerful.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to have stress dreams leading up to this race because of that. I'm going to. I already have the stress dreams. It's like, oh, I forgot my wetsuit, or whatever. My bike has one wheel for whatever reason. Yeah, but now I feel like that one's probably going to take over here pretty soon.
Didn't mean to add more stress to it, but so getting into your sport, people are probably pretty intimidated. They think that there's no way they could finish a triathlon. It's too hard. But how would you go about getting into it? The running aspect of it seems like a pretty easy, you just start running and there's tons of programs online.
Absolutely.
There's like Couch to 5K or Couch to Marathon or stuff like that. But how do you go about putting it's almost three separate events. How do you go about
so it's
learning
curious.
how to train
It's
for
a lot of
something?
trial and error, obviously, and the biggest thing that I've told people, and I actually, there was a girl at work that I convinced to do a triathlon, a sprint, I want to say last summer. And the first thing, she was like, I can run, that's not a problem. I can hop on a bike and I can get myself through what was, I think, a 12-mile bike. But the thought of swimming 500 meters, terrifies me. I was like, well, let's just go get in the water and see what happens. So the thing about triathlons, the swim, like you mentioned earlier, you could never imagine swimming 2.5 miles, much less 500 meters. But it's the swim. If you can comfortably swim 500 meters, whatever the race course distance is, if you can comfortably swim, then you're going to finish. You can get out of the water with confidence. You can not have a panic attack in the water. You can, just make progress. Then you're going to finish. The bike and the run, that's, you take bike rides when you go play with your kids. You go for runs, occasionally, I'm sure, and you can finish these things. Now, if you want to be serious about it, then yeah, we need to get in the pool a lot. We need to do certain things on the bike to make you faster. But it's two different intents. If your intent is to finish, then there's no problem. You can finish with having a decent swim and then having a comfortable bike, and then if you have something left in the tank for a run, which everybody is capable of running, then go balls to the wall and run. And if you throw up at the finish line, then you've had a good race. But if the intent is to race, then the training is intense. The training is structured, is organized. It's many hours per week, depending on the distance that you want to do. But it is daunting. Getting started. Getting started is for anybody. Couch to 5K. It is hard to get off the couch. It is very hard to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go get in a 65-degree pool. It takes a mindset. It takes a desire. You have to want to. Right now, there's a portion of my head where I want to finish this Ironman, but I have no desire to race it. I just want to get the medal at the end. I want to hug my kid, like we were talking about, and then I want to go back to sit on the couch for a little while. So that the effort level is different for this one versus the ones in the past. But for a person that just wants to see what they're capable of, I think a triathlon's great. You might have a history of swimming. You were a swimmer in high school. Well, I can guarantee if you're a swimmer in high school, you can get in the pool and swim. And you're probably going to be better off than I was, because my first swim that I did, I backstroked and doggy paddled my way through the 500 meters, and I thought I was going to die. But I got out of the water. You get on your bike. The swim becomes, it feels like it was yesterday, and by that point you're halfway through the bike ride. So triathlon's different. It's you break it up into swim, bike, and run, and hey, I finished with the swim. All right, well, I'm a third of the way done. And then by the time you've already thought of that, well, you're halfway done with the bike, and the day's already almost over. And it's no different from full distance. It's, when you get out of the water after an hour and a half, and you're like, oh, I can't believe I have a 112-mile bike left, and then a marathon. Well, before you blink, you're eating your lunch at the 60-mile mark on the bike. And then, hey, the sun's starting to go down. Oh, wait, I'm already 2 laps through on the run. And it's just mindset and desire.
Yeah. I like how you talk about breaking it into piecemeal sections. That's because looking at the whole thing, obviously it's going to be intimidating if you think about the raw mileage of the entire event. But if you just break it into little aspects, like I've got the swim done, I'm a third done. That's over with. I'm on the bike. I'm focusing on what I need to do to finish the bike in a good time, and then you're done with it, and then you're on to the run, and you're like, 1 foot in front of another. That's all I have to do until I'm done with this. And so, that's awesome. We're kind of reaching 35-ish minute mark here, so let's kind of wrap it up. What advice would you give to our listeners? The people that are type 1, whether they're newly diagnosed or,
Wow.
I'm sitting at the 29-year mark, you're at the 7-year mark. What do you think is something you wish you'd been told earlier on that would have made dealing with
so
type 1
that's an interesting question. I didn't know any type 1s. I had never had a relationship with a type 1 person up until when I was diagnosed. So I didn't. I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not going to go seek out people to talk to at that time. I'm not going to go look for a bunch of stuff. I'm going to try and lurk around Facebook and see what I can learn. But I actually have a friend whose wife was just diagnosed right before Christmas, and the thing that I stressed to her was, you can't. Every day is going to be a challenge. The meal that you have that you've maybe never had before is going to be a challenge. You're not going to know how to dose for it. You're going to have to guess to a point. But you can't let that stop you from going and trying it. And whether that's, going out to a different restaurant, whether that's trying a different sport, you don't need to let the diabetes stop you from giving it a shot, whatever it is. Because I know for a lot of people, that diagnosis hits and it's hard and it sucks. And I still struggle with the mental aspects of, I can't believe that I have to deal with this today of all the days, whatever's going on. I still have to deal with this stupid Dexcom or this Omnipod that's itching or whatever. And but the message to that person was, you just have to give it a shot and not let it get in your way.
That's really crucial. One of the big things when I first started getting into advocacy is I met this 12-year-old boy, and the doctor had flat out told him he was really big into baseball. He loved playing. He was playing, through the school year, and then he was playing summer league and stuff. When the doctor just flat out told him, like, you're going to have to stop. You can no longer do this. And I had never been, I was a little nerdy kid, so I never played sports. So nobody told me that I couldn't play sports. I just was like, I don't want to play sports. I want to go play video games and read books. But I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, I had never grown up with that mindset, and I'd never had a medical professional tell me that. And I was just floored. I'm like, no, you could absolutely do this. There's zero reason why you can't play baseball. Yeah. Play baseball to a very high level, and then I start listing off, like Jay Cutler and, the other football players that I knew of, and there's a couple of hockey players that are pretty well known.
Yeah, sure. There's a few in the NBA too. And it's there's no reason to say that, and that's sad to hear, because if you're a 12-year-old kid, when are you more impressionable? And that bug gets into your head at that age. Well, when he's 22, when he's 32, what would have changed his mind at that point?
Yeah. It sets up the kid or the person for just a lifelong of trepidation when they approach new tasks, I think. And so I think that's a very important lesson to teach the newly diagnosed earlier on, is that your life just got more difficult. We can't sugarcoat that. But there's very few things that are now barred to you. Right. I think you can't be a pilot because they just won't let you. FFA says no, but there's no bar to any sport. I've never heard of a sport that bans somebody for being a type 1.
It speaks to what we mentioned earlier, where I'm an Ironman who is type 1. I'm not a type 1 who does Ironmans. It speaks to not pushing aside the diabetes, but not letting it define you, not letting it get in the way or dictate what your life is going to be.
That's a beautiful sediment. Now I'm talking about rocks. It's a beautiful place to kind of end this podcast. Patrick, man, I've really enjoyed today. I really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate it. I couldn't have had a better time, and this is something that I've never done before, and I look forward to. If you ever want to do it again, I'd be thrilled.
That's awesome. And we're both in Texas, so we've got to get together. And I can't promise that I'll run, but I might get on a bike with you.
It's like a rote reaction now. So if I see a weight, a bar or a bench or anything, I'll probably throw up. So
fair enough.
Right.
We can just go eat. I think that's one thing. We're Texas boys, so we can both agree on some tacos probably. All right, man. Well, that's it for us today. Stay tuned for the next one.